Millionaire's incredible surprise after poor girl pays his bus fare. Amazes everyone. Welcome to Stories. TH. Today, we bring you one of the most touching stories you will ever hear. A poor girl pays bus fare for a stranger, not knowing he is a millionaire, and what he did next will surprise you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Stories TH for more inspiring videos. Emma wiped the sweat from her brow as the late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of the small cafe where she worked. Denver's bustling streets were alive with the sounds of honking cars, distant sirens, and the chatter of pedestrians. But inside the cafe, the atmosphere was thick with exhaustion and quiet determination. For the past 10 hours, Emma had been on her feet, moving briskly from table to table, taking orders, brewing coffee, wiping spills, and forcing smiles on her tired face. She was young, just 24, but the weariness in her eyes told the story of a woman carrying more than just the weight of her shift. It was the burden of an uncertain future pressing down on her slender shoulders. Today had been particularly brutal. The cafe was busier than usual, with the lunch rush spilling over into the afternoon, leaving Emma and her colleagues scrambling to keep up. Orders piled up, drinks were spilled, and frustrated customers tapped their fingers impatiently on tabletops. Emma had barely had time to breathe, let alone think about the worries waiting for her outside those glass doors. As she finally slid a half-empty cup of cold coffee onto the counter, her mind wandered to the bills she had to pay. Rent was due in less than a week, $1,200, for the tiny studio apartment she shared with her cat in a rundown part of town. The tuition for the community college classes she was taking to pursue a degree in graphic design was also looming, and there were other smaller expenses like groceries and transportation that seemed to multiply like weeds in a garden she barely had time to tend. Her paycheck was modest, barely enough to cover rent and basic living expenses, and there was no room for emergencies or luxuries. The thought of the mounting debt was suffocating, like a weight pressing on her chest. She had worked extra hours when she could, taken odd jobs painting murals for local businesses, and cut back on every expense she could think of, but it never seemed to be enough. The dreams she had as a teenager traveling, building a career, having financial freedom, felt increasingly distant, like a mirage shimmering on the horizon of her life. Emma glanced down at the small pile of change in her apron pocket. It wasn't much, just a handful of coins and a few crumpled bills, enough for a bus ticket home, maybe a cheap meal if she was lucky. She knew she couldn't afford to lose any of it. The cafe's closing time approached, and the customers gradually thinned out, leaving behind the quiet hum of the espresso machines and the clinking of dishes being washed. Emma finally allowed herself to lean against the counter for a brief moment of respite, her muscles aching and her mind swirling with anxiety. She felt a lump form in her throat and blinked back tears she refused to let fall. Tomorrow promised another long day, another shift to pay the bills, another step toward an uncertain future. She thought about the bus stop just a few blocks away and the slow, lonely ride home through the fading light of early evening. The thought of sitting alone on the worn-out seat, wrapped in her threadbare jacket, gave her a pang of loneliness she couldn't shake. She wished for a break, a moment of kindness, or a sign that things would get better. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket, a message from her mother reminding her to stay strong. Emma smiled weakly, grateful for the small comfort, but aware that her family's resources were just as strained as hers. They were her anchor, but they couldn't solve her problems. Taking a deep breath, Emma gathered her things, tied her hair back into a loose ponytail, and stepped out into the cool Denver evening. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows and painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The city lights began to twinkle on, and the streets buzzed with life. Yet Emma felt invisible among the crowd. As she walked briskly toward the bus stop, the weight of her responsibilities pressed heavily on her. Every step felt like a battle against exhaustion and doubt. Would she find the strength to keep going? Would the sacrifices she was making now ever lead to the life she dreamed of? At the bus stop, she pulled her jacket tighter around her and clutched her purse close. The familiar rumble of the approaching bus brought a flicker of relief. She climbed aboard, found a seat near the window, and gazed out as the city passed by in a blur of streetlights and storefronts. Emma's thoughts drifted to the people she'd seen today, the hurried businessmen, the families laughing together. Daniel sat in the sleek leather chair of his downtown Denver penthouse, adjusting his navy blue suit jacket with precise movements honed over years of corporate presentations. The city skyline stretched before him, a sprawling grid of glass and steel glittering under the mid-morning sun. Today was a big day. He had a critical investor meeting scheduled at 10 a.m., one that could determine the future of his company and solidify his reputation as a rising star in the tech industry. His phone buzzed insistently on the polished mahogany desk. A quick glance showed a text from his assistant confirming the meeting time and location. Daniel let out a deep breath, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with high-stakes negotiations. Everything had to go perfectly. He grabbed his sleek black briefcase, slung his tailored overcoat over his arm, and stepped out the door, mentally rehearsing the points he intended to make. The cool autumn air of Denver greeted him as he locked his apartment behind him and headed toward his shiny black Tesla parked neatly in the underground garage. The short drive to the conference center was usually a smooth, calming transition from the comfort of his home to the intensity of the boardroom. Daniel enjoyed this quiet moment to prepare, reviewing his pitch and reminding himself of the stakes. But today, as he navigated the busy city streets, a creeping sense of unease settled in his chest, like a warning bell he couldn't quite silence. As he pulled up near the conference center's entrance, the car came to a sudden stop, too sudden. A sharp knock on the window startled him. Daniel rolled down the window cautiously to see a group of 3 men emerging from the shadows of an alleyway nearby. Their faces were partially obscured by baseball caps and hoodies, but the glint of menace in their eyes was unmistakable. "Hey, man, hand over your keys and wallet, now," one of them barked, voice rough and threatening. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribcage. His mind raced, trying to assess the situation, the best possible course of action. Panic surged through his veins, freezing him momentarily. They approached swiftly. Before he could react, one man yanked the car keys from his hand. Another rifled through his pockets, grabbing his wallet and phone. The final man pulled open the passenger door, scanning quickly for any other valuables. Daniel's polished exterior crumbled in that instant. He felt exposed and vulnerable, stripped not just of his possessions, but of his sense of control and safety. The sleek Tesla, symbol of his success and status, was now a helpless trap. The sense of violation was profound. "Please, just take what you want. Don't hurt me," Daniel stammered, voice shaky, trying to mask the rising fear. The men didn't answer. They took everything of value and disappeared as quickly as they had appeared, melting back into the labyrinth of urban alleys. Daniel was left sitting stunned in the driver's seat, the cold air pressing against his skin, the city suddenly feeling alien and hostile. His breath came in shallow gasps as he stared at the empty passenger seat, the space where his phone and briefcase had been moments ago. The minutes ticked by slowly, the hum of the city continuing as if nothing had happened, while Daniel felt suspended in time, overwhelmed by a mix of shock, anger, and helplessness. He fumbled for his phone to call for help, but realized it was gone. Panic flared again, but this time it was tinged with desperation. He was alone, without means of communication, in a part of the city he didn't know well. Daniel stepped out of the car, scanning the street for any sign of the attackers. None appeared. People passed by obliviously, caught up in their own routines, leaving Daniel feeling more isolated than ever. The sense of invisibility was crushing. He called the police from a nearby payphone, hands trembling. Explaining the situation felt surreal. He, a successful businessman, now reduced to recounting every detail of his robbery on a cracked public phone. As he waited for the authorities, Daniel's mind replayed the incident over and over. Questions flooded in. How had he been so careless? Was he reckless? Was this a random crime, or had he been targeted? The answers offered no comfort. He thought about the upcoming meeting, the potential damage to his professional image, and the financial loss. But deeper than that was the gnawing sense of personal violation, the knowledge that his life had been invaded in the most basic, frightening way. The police arrived swiftly, taking his statement with practiced efficiency. Their presence was a small comfort amid the turmoil, but the process of reporting, waiting for a tow truck, and dealing with insurance added layers of frustration and fatigue to his already shaken spirit. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows over the city, Daniel found himself sitting on a bench near the conference center, the weight of the day bearing down on him. His suit jacket hung loosely over his shoulders, his tie loosened, and the crisp lines of his shirt softened by exhaustion. Tears pricked the corners of his eyes, not just from physical fatigue, but from the emotional toll. He had always prided himself on being in control, on navigating the cutthroat world of business with calm and confidence. But today, that facade had shattered. For the first time in years, Daniel felt vulnerable. The city, once his kingdom, now seemed indifferent and overwhelming. Yet beneath the despair, a flicker of determination sparked. He refused to let this incident define him. As night fell over Denver, Daniel stood up slowly, brushing off his clothes. He knew the road ahead would be challenging not just professionally, but personally. He would have to rebuild, recover, and confront the unexpected vulnerabilities life had thrown his way. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The events of the day had stripped away the veneer of invincibility, revealing the core of a man who, despite fear and loss, was still ready to fight. Tomorrow, the city would bustle on. The meeting might be postponed or lost, but Daniel would rise again, stronger and wiser for having faced the darkness. And somewhere in the distance, beneath the glowing city lights, a new chapter was waiting to begin. Daniel's heart pounded as he stood on the crowded sidewalk, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on him like an invisible force. His sleek black Tesla, the symbol of his success and independence, was now gone, stolen in a matter of moments by a group of ruthless thieves. Worse, his wallet and phone, his lifelines to the outside world, had been snatched away. For the first time in his life, Daniel was utterly disconnected, alone in the heart of Denver, without his usual comforts or means of communication. The shock still rippled through him, but reality was crashing in fast. He needed to get home. He needed to regroup. But how? The thought of navigating the city without a car or phone filled him with unease. Public transportation was foreign territory, a world he had long avoided. His life was one of convenience and efficiency, shaped by luxury and control, not the unpredictable chaos of city buses and crowded streets. Yet, desperation left him no choice. Daniel took a deep breath, steeling himself against the rising tide of anxiety. He scanned the street and spotted the approaching city bus, slowing at the stop ahead. The bus was packed with people of all walks of life, commuters, students, elderly citizens, each one absorbed in their own worlds, their lives intertwined by this shared mode of transit. He felt out of place, like a man dropped into a scene from a movie he was unfamiliar with. As the bus doors hissed open, Daniel hesitated. The worn steps looked daunting, the worn seats and bustling crowd a far cry from the comfort of his Tesla. He adjusted his expensive suit jacket, trying to blend in, but he knew he stood out too polished, too well-dressed for this setting. He swallowed his pride and stepped onto the bus. The interior was cramped and noisy. The muffled conversations, the clatter of the bus's engine, and the occasional squeal of brakes filled the air. Daniel found himself jostled as he moved down the aisle, searching for a seat. People glanced up briefly, some with curiosity, others with indifference. He felt their eyes, and it made him self-conscious. Here, he was just another face in the crowd, stripped of his usual status and power. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched the strap of his briefcase, a lifeline to his normal life. Without his phone, without his car, this bag was the only remnant of control he had left. As the bus lurched forward, Daniel sank into a window seat, his gaze distant. Outside, the city's familiar landmarks blurred past, but inside the bus, he felt trapped between two worlds. A wave of embarrassment swept over him as he noticed the casual, comfortable manner of the other passengers. Many wore worn jeans and hoodies, carrying backpacks or grocery bags. Their conversations were raw, real, sometimes loud. He felt like an intruder in a world he'd never bothered to understand, a world he'd always kept at arm's length. The bus stopped frequently, letting on more passengers, some of whom nodded or smiled politely, others who seemed lost in their own troubles. Daniel's mind raced with questions and fears. How long would this ride take? Would he get home safely? What if he was recognized? What if someone tried to take advantage of him? The vulnerability gnawed at his confidence. He caught himself glancing around, trying to remember the streets and landmarks that would signal his stop. The city passed in a mosaic of brick buildings, neon signs, and the occasional street musician. The scent of street food wafted through an open window, mingling with the faint odor of damp upholstery and exhaust fumes. Daniel's thoughts spiraled. He imagined the worst, losing the briefcase with all his work documents, being mugged again, or worse. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, trying to create a shield against the unknown. Yet, amidst the discomfort, he also noticed small moments of humanity: the elderly woman offering her seat to a mother with a baby, the young man sharing headphones with his friend, the laughter between strangers waiting for their stop. It struck Daniel how removed he had been from this side of life, the everyday struggles and simple kindnesses that played out quietly beneath the city's towering skyscrapers. He felt a pang of regret for the distance he'd placed between himself and this world, a world he'd now been forced to confront head-on. As the bus rolled on, Daniel felt the layers of his polished persona peel away. The man who once thrived on control and certainty was now just a passenger, vulnerable and uncertain. His mind flickered with memories of the meeting he was supposed to attend, the presentations, the confident pitches. Now, those seemed trivial compared to the immediate challenge of making it home safely. Around him, life carried on, passengers chatting, kids playing quietly on their parents' laps, the steady rhythm of the bus tires on asphalt. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, feeling the fatigue settle into his bones. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly as he realized this ride, uncomfortable and unfamiliar as it was also a journey of humility. When the bus finally neared his neighborhood, Daniel's pulse quickened. He scanned the streets, searching for his stop among the rows of modest houses and small businesses. The hum of the city softened, replaced by the quieter sounds of suburban life: barking dogs, children playing, neighbors greeting each other. As the bus slowed and the driver announced the stop, Daniel gathered his belongings, preparing to step back into a world that felt both familiar and foreign. He thanked the driver quietly and made his way to the door, his heart pounding with a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. Stepping off the bus, the cool evening air brushed against his face. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the scent of pine and fresh rain filled the air. Daniel looked up at the stars beginning to twinkle in the sky and allowed himself a small, weary smile. This ride on the city bus, humbling, unsettling, yet oddly grounding, was a reminder of life's unpredictability. Though stripped of his usual comforts, Daniel felt something else, a newfound resilience, a fragile hope that no matter what life threw at him, he could face it. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to embrace it. Emma stood at the bus stop on a chilly autumn evening in Denver, her breath forming little clouds in the crisp air. The weight of the day hung heavily on her shoulders after a long 10-hour shift at the neighborhood cafe, where she worked tirelessly to make ends meet. Her worn leather boots tapped nervously on the cracked concrete, and she clutched her thin jacket tighter around herself, feeling the sting of the cold as a faint reminder of the uncertainties that awaited her at home. As she waited for the bus, Emma's thoughts drifted to the mounting bills, the small pile of rent she still had to scrape together, and the upcoming community college classes she was juggling alongside her job. Each worry settled like a stone in her stomach. The world around her buzzed with the usual city sounds, distant honks, footsteps, murmured conversations, but in her bubble, time seemed to slow down. She was lost in a mix of fatigue and anxious anticipation. Suddenly, the roar of the approaching bus cut through the evening quiet. Emma stepped back, giving space as the vehicle pulled up with a screech and the doors hissed open. A wave of tired passengers spilled out into the twilight, and others boarded, filling the cramped seats inside. Among the passengers climbing aboard, Emma's gaze landed on a man who immediately caught her attention. He was well-dressed, in a tailored navy blazer and crisp slacks, but his face was a portrait of confusion and distress. His hair was slightly disheveled, and beads of sweat dotted his forehead despite the cool air. He looked around nervously, clutching a leather briefcase tightly in one hand. Emma watched as he approached the fare box, reaching into his pocket but then pulling back, his expression faltering. It was clear he didn't have enough money to pay for his bus fare. Her heart clenched at the sight. Here was a man who clearly didn't belong in this crowded, noisy bus environment, and yet he was now part of it, vulnerable and exposed. Emma could see the flicker of embarrassment and worry cross his face, emotions she knew all too well from her own struggles. Without hesitating, despite the meager amount of money she had left barely enough for her own ticket, Emma stepped forward and said softly, "Let me pay for your fare." The words came out before she could second-guess herself. The man looked up, surprised. For a brief moment, his eyes met hers, and she saw a spark of gratitude mingled with disbelief. He nodded slowly, almost hesitant, as she handed the driver the exact change, $2.75, the full price for a single ride in the city. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice low and trembling slightly. Emma smiled warmly, the simple gesture igniting a quiet sense of connection between two strangers from very different worlds. She felt a sudden rush of hope, a reminder that even in the toughest times, small acts of kindness could ripple outwards in ways no one expected. As the bus lurched forward, carrying them through the streets of Denver, Emma found herself stealing glances at the man. He seemed lost in thought, staring out the window at the passing cityscape, the glowing streetlights, the flicker of neon signs, the occasional passerby bundled up against the cold. She wondered what had brought him here, to this moment of vulnerability. Was he facing a personal crisis, a sudden loss, or simply the weariness of a life lived at breakneck speed? Emma's mind traced the lines of worry on his face, and she felt an unexpected kinship. Despite the crowded, noisy environment around them, the bus had become a shared space of quiet understanding. The man clutched his briefcase as if it were a lifeline, and Emma, in her threadbare coat, felt a surge of empathy for someone who, in so many ways, was as fragile as she was. The other passengers seemed oblivious to the silent exchange unfolding nearby. They chatted, scrolled on their phones, or stared blankly ahead. But for Emma and the man, the moment held a kind of fragile intimacy. As the bus rolled on, the man finally turned toward her, offering a tentative smile. "I don't know what to say," he confessed quietly. "It's rare to find kindness like this." Emma shrugged modestly. "Sometimes all we need is a little help. I've been there." He nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and humility. For a fleeting moment, the harsh realities of their lives softened, replaced by the simple truth that generosity could bridge even the widest gaps. The bus came to a stop near Emma's neighborhood, and as she stood to prepare to exit, she looked back at the man. "I hope things get better for you," she said sincerely. "Me too," he replied, his voice steady despite the lingering weariness. As Emma stepped off into the evening chill, she felt a warmth inside her chest that no amount of fatigue could erase. Her small act of kindness, one she barely thought twice about, had created a moment of light in someone else's dark day. The bus pulled away, carrying the man deeper into the city's labyrinth, and Emma walked the few blocks to her apartment, the quiet streets illuminated by street lamps and the distant glow of city life. She thought about the unexpected connection they had shared, a brief encounter, but one that reminded her of the power of compassion and the invisible threads that tie people together, no matter how different their lives may seem. And as she unlocked her door and stepped inside, Emma knew that despite the hardships ahead, moments like these made the struggle worthwhile. Emma's hand trembled slightly as she reached into her worn purse, feeling the cold metal of coins nestled among a few crumpled dollar bills. The bus was rattling and humming around her, passengers settling into their seats, conversations blending into a low murmur. Her heart pounded, not just from the day's exhaustion, but from the heavy weight of the decision she was about to make. The man standing before her, the one who looked lost, anxious, and out of place, still clutched his briefcase tightly, his eyes searching, confused and worried. With a breath she barely registered, Emma pulled out the exact change, $2.75, the full fare for the ride home. This was all she had left for the night, the very last money in her pocket. A rush of conflicting emotions flooded her. Fear that she might not make it back without enough money, anxiety about the uncertain road ahead, but also a profound warmth spreading through her chest. This act, small to some, felt like a lifeline, a bridge she was building toward a stranger in need. As she extended her hand toward the bus driver, holding out the change, time seemed to slow. The clatter and chatter of the bus softened into a hush. All eyes in that moment felt fixed on her, though none may have noticed. The man's eyes met hers wide and shining, with a mixture of gratitude, surprise, and something deeper, almost as if he recognized a kindred spirit in her. In that fleeting gaze, an invisible thread formed a silent connection, weaving between two lives that until then had traveled parallel paths, unaware of one another's existence. For Emma, it was as if the exhaustion, the financial worries, the long hours of labor melted away for a heartbeat, replaced by a shared humanity that defied circumstance. Her mind raced through a whirlpool of emotions. There was the cold reality: what if this decision left her stranded without a way home? What if her landlord called tomorrow, asking for rent she could barely scrape together? Yet, despite the practical fears, her soul whispered of courage and hope. She was doing what she believed was right, extending kindness without hesitation, even when it cost her. The man's lips parted, and he spoke softly. "Thank you." His voice was a quiet, sincere thread, cutting through the noise, tugging at the corners of Emma's heart. She nodded, unable to find words in that moment, the weight of the gesture grounding her in a way few experiences had before. Around them, the bus continued its journey through the city streets, pavements slick from a recent rain, streetlights casting golden pools of light against the darkness. Emma's eyes lingered on the man as he settled into his seat, still clutching his briefcase but now softened by the kindness he had received. The moments stretched. Emma felt the gentle warmth of fulfillment and vulnerability entwined, knowing that this small act might mean little in the grand scheme, yet it was everything to both of them in that shared moment. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her own struggles, the unpaid bills waiting on her kitchen table, the courses she was determined to finish despite financial strain, the lonely nights in a tiny apartment that felt more like a cage. But here, amid the hum of the bus and the quiet kindness between strangers, she found a spark of resilience, a reminder that hope could live in the smallest acts. The man glanced back at her once more, a silent promise in his gaze, as if to say that this was not the end of their story, but the beginning of something unforeseen. Emma returned the look, a mix of uncertainty and newfound strength shining in her eyes. In that moment, the bus was no longer just a means to an end, but a vessel carrying two souls toward an unexpected journey, one where generosity bridged divides and two lives intersected in the quiet hum of an ordinary evening in Denver. The world outside continued, indifferent and bustling, but inside Emma's heart, a small revolution had begun, a belief in the power of compassion, even when all seemed lost. As the bus rumbled on, the shadows lengthened, and the city lights twinkled like distant stars. Emma tucked the memory of that moment deep inside her, a beacon of hope for the long road ahead. Daniel sat back against the cold, worn plastic of the bus seat, still trying to process the surreal series of events that had unfolded in the last few minutes. The steady hum of the bus's engine filled the small space around him, mixed with the low murmur of other passengers, some talking quietly on their phones, others lost in thought or staring out at the darkening Denver streets. Outside the window, the city lights flickered like distant stars, casting an ethereal glow over the pavement and buildings. Yet, despite the familiar urban landscape passing by, Daniel felt utterly unmoored, as if he had been dropped into a world that was both foreign and strangely intimate. His mind kept returning to the moment, a moment that felt almost like a dream, when a young woman, her face etched with exhaustion, yet glowing with quiet determination, had stepped forward and paid for his bus fare with her last bit of money. That simple act of kindness had struck him more deeply than he expected, stirring a complicated tangle of emotions he wasn't used to confronting. For a man like Daniel, who had always navigated life with confidence, control, and a sharp focus on success, vulnerability was something he kept carefully guarded. His world had been built on hard work, precise planning, and an unshakable belief in his ability to manage every challenge that came his way. But now, sitting here in a cramped bus among strangers, stripped of his phone, wallet, and car, he felt exposed, yet paradoxically more connected than ever. He glanced sideways at the woman who had helped him, Emma, as she had quietly introduced herself. Her simple generosity had not only solved an immediate problem, but also pierced through the layers of Daniel's polished exterior. It was almost impossible to believe that someone so different from him, someone who struggled daily in ways he had never fully understood, could offer such kindness without hesitation. A soft warmth spread through Daniel's chest, mingling with a growing sense of wonder. Was this moment a mere coincidence, a random intersection of two lives on a city bus? Or was it something more, an unexpected turning point, a glimpse of something profound hidden within the ordinary? Daniel's thoughts flickered back to his earlier panic on the street, how the thieves had robbed him in a flash, taking away not only his possessions, but also his sense of safety and certainty. He had felt like the ground had shifted beneath him, and for the first time in a long while, he had no control over the situation. Yet now, thanks to Emma, he had found a fragile anchor in the storm. He remembered the hesitation in her eyes, the mixture of worry and hope as she offered her last dollars. Daniel was struck by her courage, the willingness to give when she had so little herself. That simple gesture, made quietly and without fanfare, resonated deeply with him. As the bus rattled along, Daniel's mind began to unravel memories and reflections he had long kept buried. He thought about the worlds they each came from, his own life of boardrooms, high-rise offices, and late-night strategy sessions, sharply contrasted against Emma's daily battles with bills, work shifts, and dreams deferred. The gap between their experiences was vast, yet here they were, sharing this brief journey. He felt a pang of guilt. Had he ever truly seen people like Emma before? Had he looked beyond his own bubble to understand the struggles faced by so many? The thought stirred a deep desire in him to change, to bridge that divide, not just with words, but with actions. Emma glanced at him again, her eyes soft and encouraging. She didn't ask for anything in return. She gave simply because it was right. That humility and grace made Daniel feel both humbled and inspired. He realized that this encounter was more than a fleeting moment. It was a lesson in humanity. For the first time in a long time, Daniel allowed himself to feel hope, not the kind rooted in numbers and deals, but the raw, human hope that kindness could make a difference. He wanted to know more about Emma, her story, her dreams, and how he might be part of something bigger than himself. Their conversation, though brief, was charged with an unspoken understanding. As the bus continued its route, Daniel found himself imagining a future where such moments were not rare, but commonplace, where people from different walks of life could connect, support each other, and grow together. The journey was far from over, and challenges remained. But in that small act of compassion, Daniel found a spark that reignited his belief in the power of empathy and the possibility of change. He sat back, breathing deeply, ready to face whatever came next with a renewed spirit. The city outside may have been indifferent, but within that bus, a new chapter was beginning, a story of hope, connection, and the unexpected beauty found in kindness. The bus crept forward, rolling slowly through the tangled streets of Denver as the city's heartbeat pulsed all around. Outside the windows, the city was a kaleidoscope of sights and sounds, honking cars, neon signs flickering in the dimming light, and a mosaic of faces hurrying along sidewalks, each with their own story. Inside, the atmosphere was a mixture of noise and quiet moments, chatter from tired commuters, the hum of the engine, and the occasional rattle as the bus navigated potholes and uneven pavement. It was chaos and calm all at once, a blend of the mundane and the miraculous. Emma sat quietly near the middle of the bus, her eyes occasionally darting toward the man who had just been helped Daniel. He was seated by the window, his posture rigid, but his eyes soft, with a mixture of gratitude and contemplation. Had stepped forward and paid for his bus fare with her last bit of money. That simple act of kindness had struck him more deeply than he expected, stirring a complicated tangle of emotions he wasn't used to confronting. For a man like Daniel, who had always navigated life with confidence, control, and a sharp focus on success, vulnerability was something he kept carefully guarded. His world had been built on hard work, precise planning, and an unshakable belief in his ability to manage every challenge that came his way. But now, sitting here in a cramped bus among strangers, stripped of his phone, wallet, and car, He felt exposed, yet paradoxically more connected than ever. He glanced sideways at the woman who had helped him, Emma, as she had quietly introduced herself. Her simple generosity had not only solved an immediate problem, but also pierced through the layers of Daniel's polished exterior. It was almost impossible to believe that someone so different from him, someone who struggled daily in ways he had never fully understood, could offer such kindness without hesitation. A soft warmth spread through Daniel's chest, mingling with a growing sense of wonder. Was this moment a mere coincidence, a random intersection of two lives on a city bus? Or was it something more, an unexpected turning point, a glimpse of something profound hidden within the ordinary? Daniel's thoughts flickered back to his earlier panic on the street, how the thieves had robbed him in a flash, taking away not only his possessions, but also his sense of safety and certainty. He had felt like the ground had shifted beneath him, and for the first time in a long while, he had no control over the situation. Yet now, thanks to Emma, he had found a fragile anchor in the storm. He remembered the hesitation in her eyes, the mixture of worry and hope as she offered her last dollars. Daniel was struck by her courage, the willingness to give when she had so little herself. That simple gesture, made quietly and without fanfare, resonated deeply with him. As the bus rattled along, Daniel's mind began to unravel memories and reflections he had long kept buried. He thought about the worlds they each came from, his own life of boardrooms, high-rise offices, and late-night strategy sessions, sharply contrasted against Emma's daily battles with bills, work shifts, and dreams deferred. The gap between their experiences was vast, yet here they were, sharing this brief journey. He felt a pang of guilt. Had he ever truly seen people like Emma before? Had he looked beyond his own bubble to understand the struggles faced by so many? The thought stirred a deep desire in him to change, to bridge that divide, not just with words, but with actions. Emma glanced at him again, her eyes soft and encouraging. She didn't ask for anything in return. She gave simply because it was right. That humility and grace made Daniel feel both humbled and inspired. He realized that this encounter was more than a fleeting moment. It was a lesson in humanity. For the first time in a long time, Daniel allowed himself to feel hope, not the kind rooted in numbers and deals, but the raw, human hope that kindness could make a difference. He wanted to know more about Emma, her story, her dreams, and how he might be part of something bigger than himself. Their conversation, though brief, was charged with an unspoken understanding. As the bus continued its route, Daniel found himself imagining a future where such moments were not rare, but commonplace, where people from different walks of life could connect, support each other, and grow together. The journey was far from over, and challenges remained. But in that small act of compassion, Daniel found a spark that reignited his belief in the power of empathy and the possibility of change. He sat back, breathing deeply, ready to face whatever came next with a renewed spirit. The city outside may have been indifferent, but within that bus, a new chapter was beginning, a story of hope, connection, and the unexpected beauty found in kindness. The bus crept forward, rolling slowly through the tangled streets of Denver as the city's heartbeat pulsed all around. Outside the windows, the city was a kaleidoscope of sights and sounds, honking cars, neon signs flickering in the dimming light, and a mosaic of faces hurrying along sidewalks, each with their own story. Inside, the atmosphere was a mixture of noise and quiet moments, chatter from tired commuters, the hum of the engine, and the occasional rattle as the bus navigated potholes and uneven pavement. It was chaos and calm all at once, a blend of the mundane and the miraculous. Emma sat quietly near the middle of the bus, her eyes occasionally darting toward the man who had just been helped Daniel. He was seated by the window, his posture rigid, but his eyes soft, with a mixture of gratitude and contemplation. Together, they rode on two souls, navigating the sprawling streets of Denver, each searching for their own path, their own peace. And in that shared journey, amidst the noise and motion, they found a glimpse of something rare: connection, compassion, and the fragile promise of tomorrow. The afternoon sky over Denver had been clear just moments before, a crisp blue canvas dotted with wisps of white clouds. But without warning, dark, heavy clouds gathered quickly, rolling in like a brewing storm. Emma and Daniel, seated side by side on the crowded bus, barely had time to register the change before the first heavy drops of rain began to pelt the windows. It was sudden and fierce, the kind of downpour that seemed to soak everything in seconds and turn streets into glistening rivers of water. Inside the bus, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The soft murmurs of conversation gave way to hurried rustling as passengers pulled out umbrellas and adjusted their coats. The once steady hum of the bus engine became punctuated by the rhythmic tapping of raindrops on the metal roof. The bus jerked slightly as the driver navigated through the slick streets, tires splashing through puddles formed on the asphalt. Emma looked over at Daniel, who sat rigidly, his crisp navy suit soaked and clinging to his broad frame. The water had seeped through the thin fabric of his jacket and trousers, darkening the material and weighing him down. His normally impeccable appearance was disheveled, the collar of his white dress shirt was damp, his hair dampened and tousled by the sudden storm. He glanced around nervously, clearly unprepared for the sudden change in weather. Emma's heart tightened with concern. Despite the exhaustion that weighed on her from a long day of work, she found herself wanting to protect this stranger who had found himself so vulnerable. She remembered her own hardships, how quickly circumstances could change, how easily one could be caught off guard by life's storms, both literal and metaphorical. As the bus jolted over a pothole, Emma instinctively shifted closer to Daniel, offering a small gesture of comfort in the cramped space. She reached for her worn scarf and draped it gently over his shoulders, hoping it might offer some warmth and protection. Daniel looked at her in surprise, the corners of his mouth twitching into a hesitant smile despite the discomfort. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice low but sincere. There was a vulnerability in his tone, a rare moment of softness that Emma hadn't expected from the composed businessmen she had seen earlier. Emma smiled back, her own weariness momentarily forgotten. "It's nothing," she replied softly. "We've all got to look out for each other sometimes." Outside the window, the rain hammered down relentlessly. The streets shimmered under the floodlights, reflections of neon signs and traffic signals creating a kaleidoscope of color in the wet darkness. Pedestrians hurried by, umbrellas bobbing like colorful mushrooms as they darted for shelter. The bus crept along more slowly now, the driver carefully maneuvering through the slick roads. The storm seemed to amplify every sound, the splash of tires in puddles, the hiss of windshield wipers, the occasional thunder rumbling in the distance. Inside the bus, the atmosphere grew tense, yet intimate, the shared experience drawing passengers together in a subtle way. Daniel's thoughts drifted back to the morning's chaos, the robbery that had stripped him of his car, phone, and wallet. The humiliation and fear he had felt seemed almost distant now, replaced by a quiet gratitude for the kindness of the woman beside him. Her gesture had been simple but profound, a lifeline thrown when he needed it most. He glanced at Emma, noticing the weariness etched into her face, but also the strength and resilience that shone through. She had been through struggles of her own, and yet here she was, offering comfort to a stranger despite her own hardships. The bus lurched again, and Daniel instinctively reached out to steady himself, his damp clothes clinging uncomfortably. He shifted closer to Emma, grateful for the warmth her scarf provided. For a moment, the two shared a quiet companionship amid the chaos. Emma looked out the window, watching the rain wash over the city. Her mind wandered to the uncertainty that lay ahead, the bills waiting to be paid, the long hours of work tomorrow, the dreams she clung to despite the hardships. But in this moment, seated next to this man whose life seemed worlds apart from hers, she found a flicker of hope. The storm outside was fierce, but inside the bus, amidst the cramped seats and damp clothing, something gentle and unexpected was unfolding, a connection, born not from shared wealth or status, but from simple human kindness and the vulnerability that binds us all. As the rain continued to fall, the bus rolled slowly toward its next stop. Emma and Daniel remained close, two strangers brought together by circumstance and weather, sharing a quiet moment of warmth and understanding amid the storm. Emma hurriedly gathered her belongings as the bus began to slow, signaling that her stop was approaching. The rain had lightened to a steady drizzle, but the damp chill clung to everything, soaking through her thin jacket and chilling her to the bone. She adjusted the strap of her worn bag over her shoulder, her mind swirling with a cascade of emotions that she struggled to make sense of. Relief that the journey was ending mingled with the lingering exhaustion of a long day and an unexpected warmth sparked by the simple act of kindness she had just extended. As the bus came to a gentle halt, Emma rose from her seat, the cramped space making it difficult to maneuver. Her heart beat quickly, a strange mixture of nervous energy and lingering fatigue. She glanced briefly at Daniel, who remained seated by the window, his gaze fixed on her as she prepared to step off. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and in that exchange, a silent understanding passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the brief but meaningful connection they had shared. Stepping onto the slick pavement, Emma felt the cool rain settle on her face, the drops mingling with the sweat and tears she hadn't even realized she'd been holding back. The streetlights cast a soft glow over the wet asphalt, reflecting the kaleidoscope of city life that continued unabated around her. Despite the chill and the dampness, there was a spark within her, a small ember of hope that warmed her from the inside out. Unbeknownst to Emma, Daniel remained seated on the bus, watching her silhouette disappear into the rainy night. The sight of her, a lone figure navigating the storm with quiet determination, left an indelible mark on his heart. For all his wealth and status, he had never experienced a moment quite like this one, where a stranger's kindness had pierced the armor of his carefully constructed life. Daniel's thoughts churned as he sat there, the hum of the bus and the patter of rain outside creating a rhythmic backdrop to his swirling emotions. The world seemed both vast and intimately small at once, the distance between them bridged by a fragile thread woven from empathy and human connection. He realized, perhaps for the first time in a long while, that real strength came not from money or power, but from moments like these, moments of vulnerability and grace. As the bus pulled away, carrying Daniel onward through the rain-slicked streets of Denver, he held on to the image of Emma's retreating figure, the curve of her shoulders beneath the damp jacket, the determined stride of someone refusing to be beaten by life's hardships. In that image, he found a sense of clarity and purpose, a renewed commitment to face his own challenges with the courage she had shown. Meanwhile, Emma walked briskly toward her small apartment, the familiar streets of her neighborhood both comforting and starkly real under the streetlights. The rain had softened, but left everything glistening, the reflections of neon signs and passing headlights shimmering on puddles. She pulled her jacket tighter, the physical cold a sharp contrast to the complex warmth swirling in her chest. Her mind raced with thoughts of the day, the long hours, the kindness she had offered, and the man whose life she had touched in a fleeting moment. She wondered about him, his worries, his story, and what had brought him to this shared bus ride on a rainy evening. The questions mingled with her own uncertainties, creating a tapestry of hope and apprehension. Arriving at her apartment building, Emma paused briefly at the entrance, the familiar creak of the door welcoming her back to a place of rest and refuge. She sank onto the worn steps outside, pulling her knees close as the rain continued its gentle descent. In the quiet solitude, the emotions she had suppressed began to surface: exhaustion, gratitude, and a flickering light of possibility. Far away, Daniel sat in a quiet cafe after finally disembarking, the warmth of the room a stark contrast to the chill he had endured. He pulled out a notebook and began to jot down thoughts, reflections sparked by the chance encounter with Emma. Her kindness had stirred something profound, a reminder of the human connections that transcend circumstance and status. As the night deepened, both Emma and Daniel found themselves wrapped in their own worlds, yet inexplicably linked by the thread of a single shared moment. The rain outside had washed over the city, cleansing and renewing, just as the experience had stirred something new within each of them, a hope for what might come next. The city around them pulsed with life, indifferent yet full of stories like theirs, countless threads weaving together the fabric of human experience. And somewhere in the rhythm of the rain and the glow of streetlights, Emma and Daniel carried forward the quiet promise of connection, kindness, and the possibility of change. Daniel sat in his sleek office on the 25th floor of a downtown Denver skyscraper, the city skyline sprawling beneath him like a glittering tapestry. The polished glass windows reflected the late afternoon sun, casting long shadows across the marble floor. But Daniel's mind was far from the comforts of his high-rise world. Ever since that rainy evening on the bus, his thoughts had been consumed by a single, persistent question. Who was the woman who had shown him such unexpected kindness? In the whirlwind of his daily life, a relentless cycle of meetings, phone calls, and strategic decisions, Daniel found himself haunted by the memory of Emma's eyes, the softness in her voice, the courage it must have taken for her to offer help despite her own hardships. He knew he had to find her, not just to thank her, but to repay a debt that went beyond money or gratitude. It was a debt of humanity, of connection. His assistant had already begun the search, digging through neighborhood cafes and community centers, making calls and asking questions. But Daniel was not content to wait passively. After hours spent behind his desk, he donned a simple jacket shedding the trappings of his CEO persona and ventured into the city streets, determined to trace the path that had led him to Emma. The city around him buzzed with life. Street vendors selling snacks, families strolling through parks, the distant sound of children laughing. But Daniel was focused, moving through the crowds with purpose, his eyes scanning faces for a hint of recognition. Each cafe he visited, every local shop he entered, he asked about the young woman who had helped a stranger on a rainy Denver bus. The search was exhausting, filled with moments of frustration and hope. Some leads turned cold, others hinted at her presence but offered no solid answers. Yet Daniel pressed on, driven by a resolve that surprised even himself. The world of high finance and boardroom battles felt distant here, replaced by a more urgent human quest. One evening, as dusk settled over the city, Daniel found himself outside a small, unassuming cafe on a quiet street corner, the kind of place Emma might work. He hesitated, the weight of anticipation pressing on his chest. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods enveloped him, a comforting contrast to the storm that had brought them together. He scanned the room, heart pounding, and there she was, Emma busy behind the counter, her face illuminated by the soft glow of hanging lights. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, the years of hardship, the miles traveled in thought, all seemed to converge. Emma's expression was a mix of surprise and cautious curiosity, while Daniel felt a wave of gratitude and something deeper, a connection that transcended their brief encounter. He approached slowly, his voice steady but warm. "Emma, I'm Daniel. I wanted to find you to say thank you for what you did on the bus. It meant more to me than I can express." Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she nodded. "I didn't expect you to find me," she replied softly. "I was just doing what I thought was right." Daniel smiled, feeling the walls he'd built around himself begin to crumble. "You taught me something important that night, about kindness and about seeing people beyond their circumstances." They talked for hours, sharing stories of struggle and hope, dreams deferred and rekindled. Daniel learned of Emma's determination to build a better life through her studies and hard work. Emma saw in Daniel not just a wealthy businessman, but a man willing to be vulnerable and open. Their meeting marked the beginning of a journey, one filled with challenges, but also with promise. As they stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights twinkling around them, both felt the quiet thrill of possibilities unfolding. Daniel's search was over, but the true adventure was just beginning. Daniel sat back in his sleek leather chair, the evening city lights of Denver casting a soft glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. Despite the glittering view and the hum of the busy city below, his mind was far from the comforts of his elite world. Ever since that rainy evening on the bus, a single image had taken root in his thoughts. A young woman with tired eyes and a gentle smile who had shown him kindness when he was most vulnerable. Her name was Emma, or at least that was what he had managed to learn. But beyond that, details were scarce. Determined to find her, Daniel had mobilized his resources, calling upon his trusted assistant and tapping into his extensive network of contacts around the city. But this quest was unlike any other he had undertaken. There were no clear leads, no familiar faces to ask, just a few vague descriptions, and the name of a small cafe, a place that seemed worlds away from his luxurious lifestyle. His assistant, Julia, had been relentless. She scoured local directories, contacted community centers, and even enlisted the help of social media groups, all in hopes of uncovering any information about the modest cafe where Emma worked. The challenge was immense. Denver was a sprawling city with thousands of such establishments, many little known outside their neighborhoods. Daniel listened intently as Julia relayed snippets of information gathered from various sources. A name here, an address there, a fleeting description of a young woman matching Emma's profile. Yet, none were definitive. The frustration was palpable. The more they searched, the clearer it became how vast the gap was between Daniel's world of boardrooms and investments and the humble reality Emma inhabited. Despite the hurdles, Daniel's resolve only strengthened. He found himself studying every detail from the bits of information Julia provided, memorizing street names, and planning visits to the neighborhoods that might hold the answers. Each new lead, no matter how small, was a beacon of hope, a step closer to reconnecting with the woman who had touched his life so profoundly. At times, Daniel felt the weight of his own privilege pressing down on him. He was acutely aware of how disconnected he had been from this side of the city, the lives lived in small apartments above corner stores, the struggles faced by people who worked tirelessly, yet barely made ends meet. Emma represented that world, and now, through his search, he was beginning to understand its texture and complexity. One evening, after a long day of meetings and calls, Daniel joined Julia on a visit to one of the neighborhoods mentioned in their findings. The streets were lined with brick buildings, small shops, and colorful murals that told stories of the community's history and resilience. It was a stark contrast to the glass towers and marble floors he was accustomed to. They entered a quaint cafe, its windows steamed from the warmth inside. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries filled the air, welcoming and unpretentious. Daniel felt a pang of nervousness as he asked the barista if they knew Emma a common name, but he hoped it might be the right one. The barista smiled kindly and pointed to a young woman wiping down tables near the back. Daniel's heart quickened as their eyes met. She looked up, her face lighting with recognition mingled with surprise. "Emma?" he asked softly. She nodded, a shy smile spreading across her face. The moment was electric, a collision of two worlds finally bridging the divide. Daniel felt a surge of gratitude and admiration for this woman who had unknowingly changed his life. Their conversation was tentative at first, filled with questions and shared stories, but beneath the surface was a growing connection. Daniel realized that this search was not just about finding Emma, it was about discovering a new perspective on life, kindness, and the unexpected paths that bring people together. As they left the cafe that evening, the city lights shimmering around them, Daniel knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but filled with promise. The gap between their worlds was wide, but with empathy and determination, it could be crossed. This was more than a search, it was the beginning of a story neither of them could have anticipated, a story of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of human connection. Daniel pushed open the worn wooden door of the small cafe, nestled on a quiet street corner in Denver. The bell above the entrance chimed softly, announcing his arrival to the handful of patrons scattered throughout the cozy interior. The air was thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries, mingling with the subtle hum of quiet conversations and the clatter of ceramic mugs. It was a world away from the polished glass towers and sleek offices Daniel was accustomed to, yet it felt inviting and real in a way that no boardroom ever had. As Daniel's eyes scanned the room, they immediately found her Emma. She was behind the counter, wiping down tables with practiced efficiency, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her worn jacket and faded jeans spoke of long hours and modest means, but there was an undeniable strength in her posture, a quiet resilience that seemed to fill the space around her. Emma looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The bustling cafe, the rain-soaked streets outside, the worries and weariness that clung to each of them all faded away. Daniel's heart quickened, not from the luxury he was used to, but from a genuine connection that defied the vast gulf between their worlds. He took a few steps forward, his polished shoes clicking softly on the tiled floor. A sincere smile spread across his face as he approached the counter. "Emma," he began, his voice steady but warm, "I wanted to find you to say thank you. Thank you for your kindness on that rainy night. You saved me in more ways than you know." Emma's eyes widened in surprise, and a flush of emotion spread across her cheeks. She opened her mouth to speak, but found herself momentarily speechless. The man before her, dressed impeccably, exuding an air of confidence and success, was the same one she had helped on the bus, the one whose gratitude had lingered in her thoughts ever since. I didn't expect you to come here," she finally managed, her voice soft but clear. "I was just doing what I thought was right." Daniel nodded, the genuine humility in her words resonating deeply. "That moment meant more to me than I can express. It reminded me that beneath the facades, we're all just people trying to get by. Your kindness gave me hope when I needed it most." Their conversation unfolded naturally, weaving through stories of struggle, resilience, and dreams yet to be realized. Daniel listened intently as Emma spoke of her aspirations to finish college, to build a life beyond the constraints of her current circumstances. In turn, he shared the pressures and loneliness that often accompanied his success, revealing vulnerabilities rarely seen in the boardrooms he frequented. As the evening light softened outside, casting a warm glow through the cafe windows, the distance between them seemed to shrink. They were no longer just businessman and waitress, but two souls connected by a shared humanity and the transformative power of kindness. When it was time to leave, Daniel hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "If you ever need anything or just want to talk, please don't hesitate to reach out," he said with sincere warmth. Emma accepted the card, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief in her eyes. "Thank you, Daniel. This means more than you know." As he stepped back into the rainy Denver night, Daniel felt a profound sense of peace. The encounter was more than a reunion. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, connection, and the promise of unexpected possibilities. The cozy cafe was bathed in the soft glow of amber pendant lights, casting warm pools of light over the worn wooden tables and vintage decor. The scent of freshly ground coffee beans and baked pastries lingered in the air, creating an inviting sanctuary from the brisk Denver evening outside. Inside, the hum of quiet conversations and the occasional clink of ceramic mugs formed a gentle backdrop to an unfolding story, one of two strangers bridging the gap between vastly different worlds. Emma sat opposite Daniel at a small corner table, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. The initial shock of seeing this polished, successful man, who had once been just a fleeting passenger on a bus, had slowly given way to a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. Her eyes met his, and she noticed a warmth there, a sincerity that transcended the barriers she had built around herself. Daniel, for his part, found himself captivated by Emma's unpretentious charm and quiet strength. Her presence was a stark contrast to the high-powered environments he was accustomed to, a world of boardrooms and business suits. Here, in this humble cafe, he felt stripped of pretense, able to simply be himself. The initial awkwardness between them melted away as they began to share pieces of their lives. "I've always admired people who can keep going no matter what," Daniel began softly, his voice tinged with genuine respect. "It's not something I've always been good at." Emma smiled shyly, her gaze dropping to her cup. "Life has a way of testing you," she replied. "I've worked long hours to pay rent, to put myself through school. Sometimes it feels like no matter how hard you try, the world keeps moving ahead without you." Her words resonated deeply with Daniel. He saw in her the resilience and determination that often went unnoticed beneath everyday struggles. "What are you studying?" he asked, leaning forward with interest. "Graphic design," Emma answered, a hint of pride in her tone. "I want to create things that inspire people, maybe even tell stories that matter." Daniel nodded appreciatively. "That's incredible. Creativity is powerful. It's what drives innovation in my world, too." As they exchanged stories, the atmosphere between them grew more relaxed and genuine. Emma shared tales of balancing work and classes, the exhaustion that came with chasing dreams while managing bills and responsibilities. Daniel recounted the pressures of leading a company, the loneliness that success sometimes brought, and the unexpected vulnerability he'd felt during the recent events. There was a shared recognition in their conversation, a mutual understanding of struggle and aspiration, despite the differences in their circumstances. The gap between their worlds seemed to narrow with each word spoken. At one point, Emma laughed softly at a self-deprecating joke Daniel made about his own lack of street smarts. The sound was light and genuine, a stark contrast to the polished formality Daniel usually encountered in his daily life. He found himself drawn to her authenticity, feeling a connection that was both surprising and welcome. "I never expected to find this," Daniel confessed quietly, his eyes locked on hers. "Not just the kindness you showed me, but this conversation, this feeling of being understood." Emma's cheeks flushed, and she looked away briefly before meeting his gaze again. "Me neither," she admitted. "It's nice to talk without pretending." They spoke for hours, the cafe around them slowly emptying as the night deepened. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the dark sky, but inside, time seemed to slow, creating a bubble where two lives intersected in meaningful ways. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel felt a profound gratitude, not only for the kindness that had sparked this meeting, but for the genuine connection that had blossomed. Emma had shown him a world beyond the polished surfaces, reminding him of the human spirit's resilience and the simple beauty of shared understanding. Emma, too, felt a renewed sense of hope. The weight of her daily struggles seemed lighter, buoyed by the unexpected friendship and the possibility of new beginnings. They parted with promises to stay in touch, their parting smiles filled with unspoken possibilities. Both knew their journey was just beginning, a journey defined not by wealth or status, but by empathy, courage, and the shared dreams that united them. Daniel and Emma's newfound connection was like a delicate bloom amidst a storm, beautiful but vulnerable, fragile yet full of promise. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the harsh realities of their vastly different lives began to assert themselves, casting long shadows over their hopeful beginning. Life, with its relentless pressures and unforgiving demands, was waiting patiently, ready to test the strength of their bond. For Daniel, the high-stakes world of business was unforgiving. His days were swallowed by back-to-back meetings in glass-walled boardrooms, strategic planning sessions, and constant negotiations with investors demanding results measured in millions of dollars. The weight of responsibility rested heavily on his shoulders. Each decision carried significant consequences, not just for the company, but for hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on his leadership. His work demanded perfection, efficiency, and unwavering focus, leaving little room for personal distractions. Despite the exhilaration of success, Daniel often felt isolated. The polished veneer of his professional life masked a growing sense of loneliness. The social circles he frequented were steeped in wealth and status, environments where vulnerability was a liability and emotions were carefully controlled. In these circles, genuine connection was rare and expectations rigid. The pressures mounted, creating a relentless push and pull between his public persona and the private man, yearning for simplicity and authenticity. Emma, on the other hand, faced her own battles on a different front. Her days were consumed by a juggling act of work, school, and bills. Each shift at the cafe was a struggle against exhaustion, a fight to earn enough to pay rent, buy groceries, and keep her dreams alive. The financial strain was a constant presence, a shadow that loomed over every decision. The weight of student loans, mounting expenses, and the uncertainty of the future created an ever-present tension that chipped away at her peace of mind. Beyond the financial hardships, Emma grappled with societal judgments and internal doubts. Her world was one where opportunities were hard-won, and preconceived notions about class and status could create invisible barriers. The gulf between her life and Daniel's was not just about money, it was about perceptions, expectations, and the social scripts written long before they met. Their relationship, while rooted in genuine affection and mutual respect, was now navigating a minefield of challenges. The societal divide was palpable. Friends and acquaintances from Daniel's world often questioned the sincerity of his feelings, casting skeptical glances at the woman they saw as different, sometimes dismissing her as an outsider to their exclusive circles. Similarly, Emma faced whispers and raised eyebrows within her community, where the idea of dating a wealthy businessman seemed like a fantasy or a folly. These external pressures seeped into their private moments, adding layers of complexity and doubt. Daniel found himself torn between his desire to bridge the worlds and the fear of alienating those who had shaped his identity. Emma struggled with insecurities, questioning whether she could truly belong in Daniel's world without losing herself. Their conversations grew more nuanced, filled with moments of vulnerability where they laid bare their fears and hopes. Daniel shared the loneliness that success often brought, the suffocating expectations, and the sacrifices made at the altar of ambition. Emma opened up about the exhaustion of making ends meet, the sting of judgment, and the burning desire to carve out a life beyond limitations. Despite the difficulties, they found strength in their shared commitment to understanding and supporting each other. They sought ways to bridge the divide, Daniel attending local community events with Emma, immersing himself in her world, Emma learning to navigate the nuances of Daniel's lifestyle with grace and confidence. Each step was a testament to their willingness to grow together, to challenge the boundaries set by society and their own fears. Yet, the balance was precarious. There were days when the weight of their separate realities felt overwhelming. Scheduling conflicts, financial strain, and moments of doubt tested their resolve. Misunderstandings arose, fueled by the pressures surrounding them, leading to moments of tension and heartache. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, Daniel returned home to find Emma exhausted and disheartened. They sat together in silence, the room filled with unspoken worries. It was in these quiet moments that their commitment was reaffirmed, not through grand gestures, but through the simple presence and the shared determination to face the challenges together. Their journey was far from easy. The chasm between their worlds was vast, but it was bridged by something deeper than circumstance, love, respect, and a shared vision of a future where differences were not barriers, but strengths. As they continued to navigate the complexities, Daniel and Emma discovered that true connection required courage, not just to love, but to confront the challenges life threw their way. The early morning sun had just begun to filter through the dusty windows of the small cafe where Emma worked. The gentle clatter of cups and the murmur of the first few customers created a sense of calm that contrasted starkly with the storm brewing quietly beneath the surface. For Emma and Daniel, the weeks since their first encounter had been a whirlwind of emotions, hope, connection, and the delicate weaving of two very different lives. But today, that fragile tapestry was about to face a sudden and unexpected test. Emma was moving briskly behind the counter, her usual warm smile in place as she balanced taking orders, preparing drinks, and managing the steady flow of customers. Daniel had arrived early, his presence quietly noticeable even in this humble setting, a stark contrast to the polished boardrooms and high-powered meetings he was accustomed to. Yet here he was, standing beside her, sharing the everyday moments she had come to cherish. But fate had other plans. The door swung open with a sharp bang, and in stormed a man whose presence seemed to suck the warmth from the room. He was tall, with a sharp gaze and a voice that cut through the cafe's gentle buzz like a whip. "Excuse me," he barked, eyeing the cafe with obvious disdain. "What kind of operation is this? I've been waiting for my coffee for over 10 minutes. His voice was loud, commanding, and unmistakably angry. Emma's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly composed herself. "I'm very sorry, sir," she said politely. "We're doing our best to serve everyone as quickly as possible." The man scoffed, glaring at Daniel with a sneer. "And who's this? Looks like the boss's new toy." His words hung in the air, laced with contempt and accusation. Daniel stepped forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the man's aggression. "Sir, I assure you, we're working hard to serve all our customers promptly," he said evenly. But the man wasn't placated. "I don't care who you are," he spat. "I'm paying customer here, and I expect better service. Maybe you should stop playing at charity and run a real business." The cafe fell into an uneasy silence. Other patrons glanced nervously at the confrontation, some whispering amongst themselves. Emma felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and anger. She looked to Daniel, who nodded subtly, encouraging her to remain composed, but the man wasn't done. "And what's this? A rich guy trying to save a poor waitress?" His gaze sharpened. "Is this some kind of publicity stunt? You should be careful. playing with people's lives. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. The words stung, not just for their implication, but because they touched on the very fears and insecurities she had been struggling to suppress. Daniel's expression tightened, the patience he had shown beginning to crack under the weight of the man's accusations. The tension escalated quickly. The man's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of everyone in the cafe. "You think a few dollars and a smile can change anything? People like you don't understand real struggle. You're just using her." Daniel's eyes darkened. "Enough," he said firmly. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Emma helped me when I was vulnerable. That kindness is real, and it doesn't need your approval." The man's response was a bitter laugh. "Keep telling yourself that. But in the end, you're both just playing roles in a game you don't understand." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, the stress of the confrontation pushing her to the edge. She clenched her fist behind the counter, fighting to keep her composure. Daniel reached out, gently touching her arm in a reassuring gesture. The cafe owner, a stout woman with a commanding presence, stepped in. "Sir, if you have a problem, I suggest you take it elsewhere. We're here to serve, not to be insulted." The man shot her a venomous look, but eventually backed down, muttering under his breath as he stormed out the door. The cafe sighed collectively, the tension slowly dissipating, but leaving behind a residue of unease. Emma sank onto a stool, her hands shaking slightly. Daniel sat beside her, his usual confident demeanor softened by concern. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, though her eyes betrayed the turmoil inside. "I'm fine," she said quietly. "It's just hard sometimes. People don't see the whole story. They see what they want." Daniel took a deep breath, the reality of their situation settling heavily between them. "We knew it wouldn't be easy," he said, "but I won't let anyone make you feel less than you are. You are strong, and this," he gestured between them, "this is real." Their conversation stretched into the afternoon, a blend of vulnerability and resolve. They talked about the societal divides that kept people apart, about the prejudices that judged before understanding, and about the strength required to bridge those divides. Emma shared stories of past hardships, the late nights, the financial struggles, the moments of loneliness. Daniel listened, truly listened, his respect for her deepening with each word. He too opened up about the pressures of his world, the expectations, the isolation, the fear of being misunderstood. Through their shared stories, a bond strengthened, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by mutual respect. Yet, the day's events were a stark reminder that love and kindness alone could not shield them from the harsh judgments of the world. As evening approached, the cafe's atmosphere shifted back to its usual warmth, the crisis seeming momentarily past. But in their hearts, Emma and Daniel knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. They faced a world that often preferred to keep people in their separate corners, reluctant to accept the beauty of connection that transcended class and circumstance. That night, as they parted ways outside the cafe, the rain had ceased, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of streetlights. Daniel reached for Emma's hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We'll face this together," he promised. Emma smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Together," she echoed. The road ahead was uncertain, but in that moment, they found strength in each other, ready to confront whatever storms life might bring. I'm ready to craft the final 2,000-word dramatic and emotionally rich narrative continuation of Emma and Daniel's story, capturing the hope, tension, and depth as their journey continues beyond the recent conflict. I'll weave in suspense, character development, and a compelling conclusion that keeps readers engaged, fitting perfectly for your American audience and incorporating U.S. measurement units. Let me begin. The rain had finally stopped, leaving Denver's streets glistening under the warm glow of the street lamps. Emma and Daniel stood outside the small cafe, their breaths mingling in the crisp evening air. The tension from the earlier confrontation with the irate customer still lingered, but now a fragile calm settled between them, a quiet understanding that their journey was only just beginning. Daniel's hand found Emma's, his grip firm and steady, a silent promise of support and companionship. They were two souls from entirely different worlds. His life of luxury and boardroom battles contrasted sharply with her humble days of juggling work and school. Yet, in this moment, the divide felt narrower, bridged by their shared experiences, hope, and something deeper blossoming between them. As they walked down the rain-slick sidewalk, their conversation meandered from the pressures of Daniel's corporate empire to the dreams Emma nurtured quietly in the back of her mind. Despite the challenges ahead, both felt a spark of optimism, a belief that love and kindness could carve a path through even the most daunting obstacles. But the path was far from smooth. Over the next weeks, Emma and Daniel faced the relentless reality of their worlds, demanding work schedules, financial constraints, and the ever-present judgment of those around them. Daniel's high-profile status meant that every public appearance, every social interaction was scrutinized. Whispers and sideways glances followed their emerging relationship, skepticism fueled by the stark contrast between their lives. Emma wrestled with her insecurities, feeling the weight of societal expectations pressing down. Would she ever truly belong in Daniel's world? Could their love survive the relentless tide of doubt and prejudice? Yet, with every doubt, Daniel's unwavering support bolstered her spirit. He challenged the assumptions of his peers, defending Emma fiercely, reminding her and himself that their connection was rooted in something far beyond wealth or status. Their relationship became a delicate dance of balancing two worlds. Daniel accompanied Emma to community events, embraced the warmth and authenticity of her neighborhood, and shared in the small joys of her daily life. Emma, in turn, learned to navigate the nuances of Daniel's elite circles, gaining confidence and strength in her own identity. Together, they faced misunderstandings and setbacks. There were moments of tension arguments born from fear and exhaustion, the sting of external judgment, and the personal sacrifices demanded by their commitment. Yet, each challenge deepened their bond, forging a partnership built on resilience, respect, and an enduring belief in the power of love. One evening, as they stood on Daniel's penthouse balcony overlooking the sprawling cityscape, Emma rested her head on his shoulder. The city lights twinkled like distant stars, a reminder of both the vastness of the world and the intimacy they shared. "We're different," Emma whispered, "but I think that's what makes this so real." Daniel kissed her forehead gently. "It's not about where we come from. It's about where we're going together." Their story was far from over. It was a tale of love tested by adversity, of kindness shining through the cracks of a divided world. It left open the question of what the future held, uncertain, yet filled with possibility. For Emma and Daniel, the journey ahead was a testament to the strength of human connection, the courage to defy expectations, the perseverance to overcome obstacles, and the hope that, against all odds, love could build bridges where none seemed possible. And so, beneath the glowing Denver sky, two hearts beat in unison, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. The story of Emma and Daniel offers profound lessons about kindness, perseverance, and the power of human connection to overcome social barriers. In today's fast-paced and often divided world, it's easy to be separated by status, finances, or societal prejudices. Yet, it is compassion and understanding that build the strongest bridges between people. One important takeaway is never to judge others by their appearance or current circumstances. Even small acts of kindness can create significant impact, transforming not only the lives of those we help, but also our own. Perseverance in facing challenges, whether in work or personal life, is essential to overcoming adversity. For adults, maintaining sincerity and openness in relationships creates a solid foundation for lasting happiness and success. Sometimes, differences are not obstacles, but opportunities to learn, grow, and build timeless values in life. Embracing this mindset helps us navigate complexities with empathy and strength, enriching both ourselves and those around us. Thank you so much for watching. If this touching story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to Stories TH. Your support means the world to us.